Joining me now, Bryan Chu, who covered the Lakers for NBA.com and first met Jeremy Lin in 2008 while reporting for the San Francisco Chronicle.
Story, love it. Now, if Jeremy Lin is big in Toronto, as you can see, you can just imagine how huge he is in the United States. Well, Bryan Chu is a front row seat to all the hype. He's a sports columnist for NBA.com, and he keeps in regular contact with Lin. Bryan joins me from Indianapolis.
Bryan Chu knew Lin before all this. He followed him in high school, and he followed him through college when he went to Harvard. And Bryan's now a columnist for the BleacherReport.com, and he joins us this morning from Bloomington, Indiana.
We now welcome in Bryan Chu, an award-winning journalist who has covered Jeremy Lin since Lin was at Harvard.
Our next guest has been obsessed with this guy since Lin was in high school. Bryan Chu writes for BleacherReport.com. It's an influential sports website. He joins us now via Skype from Indiana University, where you're studying for an MBA. Is that right?
That's correct.
Hey, Bryan, thanks for being on the show. When did you first hear of Jeremy Lin?
I heard of him back when I was at UCLA, and I was working on a story, and he was playing at Palo Alto High School, and just kind of followed his career and got a chance to interview him back in 2008 when he was in the summer league between his sophomore and junior year at Harvard. And that's when our relationship started to grow from there.
Also, Bryan Chu wrote an excellent piece about Jeremy Lin, which I read. That
He said, I and other Asian Americans are living vicariously through his success as a Knick. Jeremy is one of us. And go to the phone. We have you. Bryan, tell us what place Jeremy has in both your Asian American cultural history and in the NBA.
He's an inspiration. You have all these young athletes who dream to play in the NBA, and even myself, just growing up playing basketball, it's a big sport amongst the Asian Americans. And to have him continue to believe, even though when he was young, you would hear, I'm too short, I'm too small, and he gets picked last all the time. You have someone that believed in himself, that had the support of his parents, and that was able to take it to the next level to get to this point where he basically went undrafted, unnoticed, bounced around from team to team, and the fact that he's able to lift the whole entire Asian American community, not just the Chinese, Taiwanese, but Filipino, Korean, and everyone else, they looked up to him. It's an amazing story.
Bryan, do you think he had trouble getting noticed and getting credit because he is Asian?
You know what, I asked him that same exact question because he was the Northern California Division II Player of the Year in high school, and he took his team to the state championship. I asked him that exact question in 2008, whether or not that played a role in the reason why he didn't get a Division I scholarship. And he kind of chuckled and he said, "What do you think?"
Yeah, and he was playing right under Stanford's should have been watchful eye, but he got away to Harvard, and Harvard didn't have the highest hopes for him. There's one of the Harvard coaches was quoted in the New York Times saying, if I told any of the guys on the team, this is the Harvard team, if I told any of the guys on the team that Jeremy's someday going to play in the NBA, none of them would have believed that. And he was pretty good. He was great at Harvard.
Yeah, and the thing is that I first met him and I first saw his game up close and personal in 2008. He didn't have a jumper, but what he did have was that will, that drive to want to be the best. You would see him dive on the court. He would clank a bunch of shots, but he just went after it. He had this whole entire mentality where he wanted to be the best. He would play any type of pickup game. He even asked me if I wanted to go to the gym with him just to shoot hoops. If you have someone that's willing to put the whole heart and soul into it and still manage everything that he's gone through in terms of the racist remarks that he's heard on the road while playing in the Ivy League and just playing in the country, and to be able to have that type of inner strength and to be able to deflect all of that, it's a great story.
Bryan Chu, thank you very much for your invaluable insight tonight.
I read one of the columns that you'd written, and you started by saying that Jeremy Lin inspires you. Why does he inspire you?
It's to hear his story, to see where he came from originally. Here's a kid that was undrafted to begin with, and then you see him bouncing around from team to team, never even having a chance sitting on the end of the bench, and all of a sudden, perfect storm situation, everyone gets injured, and suddenly he's a starting point guard of the Knicks, and look what he's been able to do in the last 5 days, or the last 5 games, excuse me. And to even be in that situation in the first place, it takes a lifetime to even make a scratch in the New York scene, and Jeremy Lin was able to do this in a week. That's inspirational, and to hear his personal story, back in 2008 about all the stereotypes, all the racist remarks you used to hear. I've heard some of these in my career in the past, so I was able to learn a lot from him and take this into my own life.
Yeah, and I wonder that factor of it. How big is his race? He's a Taiwanese American born. How big is a factor is that in this story?
I believe it's a huge factor. You have all these kids growing up, these Asian American kids who are playing basketball, who are told that you're too skinny, you're too short. You know, you're gonna be picked last, and everyone actually wants to guard you because they think you're the easiest out. Now you have Jeremy, who's gone through all of the same things that all of these kids, including myself, have encountered when we were young, and he's able to break all these stereotypes. He's able to keep believing, and he really has this type of tenacity that's, in my mind, unparalleled.
Would swap stories, and I read some of the articles that you've written about him over the years about race and racism. He told you some really unpleasant things that have happened to him over the years. What did he tell you?
Yeah, he told me in 2008 that when he was on the road, just playing for Harvard, that he would hear a lot of things such as Chinese import, Yao Ming, open your eyes, the orchestra's on the other end of the building. And when he was telling me these things, it resonated a lot with me because I saw a lot of similar things as a journalist, and even in my personal life, instances at the supermarket, having people actually hit my cart when I'm pushing it along the aisle, and people saying not great things about me not being allowed to be in the same aisle as them. So when I was telling him stories like that, he totally connected with me, and to see him being able to have that inner strength to still block all of it out and still go about his business and still pursue his dream and doing whatever it takes and not giving up. It's an inspiration not only to the basketball community, but also to the Asian community in general.
Jeremy Lin is the fourth Asian American in NBA history. The most prominent before him, Rex Walters, who played with 3 teams in the league in the 1990s. And you can see the list. The other 2 aren't as well known. Wat Misaka did play for the Knicks, ironically enough, in the late 40s. When you talk about the most prominent Asian Americans in sports today, Tiger Woods, Michelle Wie, Apollo Ono. In baseball, Tim Lincecum, Johnny Damon, Hines Ward in the NFL.
You know, credit his parents especially, because growing up in terms of being a Chinese American, you always have parents that want you to be lawyers, they want you to be doctors, yet his parents were by his side the entire time, and he kept on believing throughout. And I think that's the biggest impact, the message that he can pass along to the different Chinese Americans out there, even to the Filipino community, the Vietnamese community, all across. It's not just Chinese, it's not just Taiwanese, but it's a great message, and you know, just to see him do this is very special.
We are back. Richard Neer with you on The Fan, and we have examined Jeremy Lin from just about every angle we can. But we got another one for you here. Bryan Chu joins us. He is from the Bleacher Report, and he's written a story about Jeremy and his struggles and travails. And Bryan has seen similar things in his career as a sports writer. When the Irish came over here, they were the mix, the Italians. I mean, I don't have to give you all the racial slurs. You know them. You've heard them on your end. But it just seems that shouldn't we be past that with Asian Americans at this point? This is what shocks me, because I can understand in basketball it's a little bit different, but in your field, in sports writing, sports casting, I have seen a lot of Asian Americans, and I'm shocked that you've endured a lot of name calling and a lot of people looking down their nose and thinking that you were odd. And tell me about some of your travails as you developed your career.
Well, I started in small market areas, and when I went out to cover games, whether it be high school games or maybe even college games, I would get heckled a little bit. And you would always hear things like, for example, maybe ching chong would be something that comes to mind that I would hear. And even today, I still hear some of these things wherever places that I go, and you would think that things would change. But when I first was talking with Jeremy, that's how we clicked right away, because he was telling me about these things that he experienced when he was on the road while playing in the Ivy League, and then I would tell him about the things that I endured early in my career, and as it progressed, and that's how we clicked in that sense. We're on the same wavelength in terms of what we've gone through, and it's interesting to see how
this sports instance and what Jeremy Lin's gone through, and maybe a little bit myself, is a microcosm of how things haven't progressed. And this is 2012 we're talking about, and this was 2008 when I first wrote this article about him and other Asian Americans and the lack and the racism and the stereotypes that still exist, and it's still happening today. And
China is a huge market that they've had their eye on for a long time. There seem to be a lot of NBA fans there, a lot of basketball fans there, and he is just going to be almost the Jackie Robinson in that sense, isn't he? If he can continue.
Yeah, absolutely. Ever since Yao Ming retired, they were kind of looking for who is that next Asian star, and they can plug Jeremy right in there, and I feel like it's not just for China, but it's also he has Taiwanese roots, so being from Taiwan, he gets a lot of exposure there as well, and I believe it transcends more than just being Chinese and being Taiwanese, but also Filipino, Vietnamese, Korean, the entire Asian community. They're basically embracing him. This is an individual that everyone can relate to. He's not, 7 foot plus, but he's a guard. He's the one who's started playing ever since he was young, and he's gone through everything that I've played basketball. I've gone through things that he's gone through, being picked last, not thinking that I was good enough to play, and he's gone through it, and he's shown everyone if you continue to endure, if you continue to believe, and you persevere, that, if the sky's the limit for you.
Yeah. Well, Bryan, one of the things that impressed me, one of the stories that was written in New York, and there have been lots of them, as you can imagine, about Jeremy, was that his mom, when he was playing, and I think it was in college or it might have been still in high school, but he came home with an A-, and his mother called the coach and said, look, if he doesn't get that back to an A, he's not going to be playing basketball anymore. That says a lot about, where his values came from.
Yeah, no, it's when you say that, I didn't hear that story, but I can believe it in the sense that, and I grew up with the same exact mentality with my mom, and I hear from all my other classmates growing up that from a Chinese background that you need to have that A, and A- is not good enough, and I think that helps build character in the sense that you don't want to settle for an A-. You always want to try to be the best. You want to put everything forth and put your heart into it, and you want to just have the best possible outcome. And by doing that is believing in everything that you're doing and to try your hardest. And that's what Jeremy did. You have this person who, like is mentioned before, never got a Division I scholarship, was undrafted. Now you're saying he had this crazy 8-day span right here with the Knicks. It's just phenomenal to hear the type of hard work that he's put ever since he was young. And I credit to his mom. A- is not good enough, and maybe being on the bench on the end of the Knicks bench isn't good enough. So now look what he's doing.
Absolutely. Well, Bryan Chu, thanks so much for joining us, and I hope you don't have to endure much more of the stuff that you have already, because you're doing a great job, and this stuff in 2012 should be way past us, I hope. Yeah.
Bryan, again, you've talked to him over the years, again, since he was in college, and certainly noticed him as a high school player out in California. How have you seen him morph from a young adult into now in the NBA as a star?
Aside from his game, in terms of his personality, he's pretty much remained the same. He's humble, he's reserved, and he really wants to get better. Every single time you hear him say anything, it's about team. I want to get my team better. When he was at Harvard, and I talked to him back in 08, his team at Harvard was 8-22, and he said, you know what, I want to try to win the Ivy League championship. And now I bet if right about now he'll say, I have the playoffs in mind, and I want to help lead this team to a championship.
And you have to agree, you know the game better than I do, that he's had 5 strong games, but that's it. This isn't like 5 consecutive seasons. It's 5 strong games. Do you think the bubble is going to burst?
I wouldn't say burst per se. Maybe it might deflate a little bit once Stoudemire's back, Melo. He won't get as many touches as he did before, but the type of player Jeremy Lin is, he always distributes the ball well. He gets everyone involved. It's all about the dribble penetration, and he's shown over the course of these 5 games that he's able to take over a game and hit the big jumper when needed.
Well, listen, I know there are a lot of people out there cheering for him, and they want this Lindarella story to continue, so we'll continue to watch it. Bryan, great to talk to you tonight. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me on.